They say a woman who builds an empire from scratch knows the exact weight of every brick. I can tell you that's the absolute truth. I know the cost of every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, and every tear that went into building Samira's Soul Food and Catering. I also know exactly what it feels like when the man you've loved for 35 years tries to steal those bricks to build a glass house for another woman. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button. Let me tell you a story about family, betrayal, and the kind of justice that is best served ice cold. My name is Samira. I am 62 years old, and for the last 3 decades, I have been the silent engine of my family. If you live in our city, you know my food. You've had my baked macaroni and cheese at weddings, my smothered pork chops at church anniversaries, and my peach cobbler at retirement parties. I built my business the old-fashioned way, standing on my feet for 14 hours a day, burning my arms on commercial ovens, and saving every dime. My husband, Marcus, is 65. If you met Marcus, you'd think he was a retired movie star. He is a handsome man, always smelling of expensive cologne, always wearing tailored suits or crisp golf polos. For years, I let Marcus play the role of the CEO. He loved walking into the front office, greeting the clients, shaking hands, and taking the credit. Meanwhile, I was in the back, wearing an apron, making the magic happen. I didn't mind. I loved him. I thought his pride was harmless. I thought letting him feel like the king of the castle kept our family strong. We have 2 grown children. Jamal is 35, a young man who has spent the last 10 years chasing one failed tech startup after another, always coming to me to bail him out. Tasha is 32, a single mother who loves her kids, but resents me. She always says I'm too strict, too controlling, and too focused on money. Marcus, of course, was always the fun dad, the one who would sneak them cash and tell them I was just being difficult. I thought we were a normal family with normal problems, until a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I was up to my elbows in flour, preparing for a 500-person charity gala when my cell phone rang. It was David, my main supplier for prime meats and poultry. We've done business together for 20 years. Samira, David said, his voice hesitant. I hate to bother you with this, but the corporate credit card you have on file, it just declined. Twice. I wiped my hands on my apron, frowning. That's impossible, David. The account has a $30,000 limit, and I just paid the balance last week. Run it again. It must be a machine error. I did, Samira. The bank flagged it for insufficient funds. You might want to call them. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I excused myself, went into my small, windowless back office, and locked the door. I pulled up our business banking portal on my computer. I handled all the finances, or at least I thought I did. Lately, Marcus had volunteered to take some of the administrative burden off my shoulders, offering to handle the monthly reconciliations. I had been so exhausted I gladly handed over the passwords. What I saw on that screen made the breath leave my lungs. Our primary operating account, the one that usually sat comfortably in the 6 figures, was bleeding dry. Over the past 8 months, there had been massive unexplained withdrawals. But it wasn't just cash. It was the credit card statements. I clicked through the history, my eyes scanning the charges. Oakwood Realty, $4,500. Lumina Luxury Auto Brokers, $1,200. The Sapphire Jewelers, $3,800. Renee's Beauty Lounge, $850. And then, the kicker. A recurring monthly wire transfer of $5,000 to an LLC I had never heard of. M&R Ventures. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. When you've survived as much as I have in this life, your first instinct isn't to fall apart. It's to gather information. I spent the next 4 hours printing every statement, every transfer, every receipt. I traced the M&R Ventures LLC through public state records. M stands for Marcus. R stands for Renee. Renee was a 45-year-old woman who owned a failing boutique across town. I knew her vaguely from a few community events. She was the kind of woman who played the damsel in distress perfectly, soft-spoken, always needing a strong man to help her with her bags or her business advice. Apparently, my husband had decided to be her savior, using my money. The Oakwood Realty charges? A down payment and monthly mortgage on a beautiful 4-bedroom suburban house. The luxury auto brokers? A lease on a brand new Mercedes SUV. My husband, the man whose underwear I still folded, the man who complained about the price of my arthritis medication, was funding an entire second life. That evening, Marcus came home whistling. He kissed me on the cheek, told me he had a long day of networking, and asked what was for dinner. I looked at this man, the father of my children, and felt absolutely nothing. The love I had for him evaporated in that kitchen, replaced by a clarity so cold it burned. "Just leftovers tonight, Marcus," I said, my voice steady. "I'm exhausted." "You work too hard, baby," he said, pouring himself a glass of the expensive scotch he bought with my business card. "You need to learn to delegate. Let me handle more of the heavy lifting." I almost laughed. "I think I will, Marcus. I think things are going to change very soon." The next morning, while Marcus was at the golf course, I sat in the oak-paneled office of Elias Thorne. Elias was a 68-year-old corporate attorney, a pillar of our church, and a friend I had known since we were both struggling in our 20s. I pushed the thick binder of printed statements across his desk. Elias put on his reading glasses, his face growing darker with every page he turned. "Samira," Elias said softly, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This man has lost his mind. He's embezzled close to $200,000 from your company." "Is it embezzlement if his name is on the accounts?" I asked, my voice tight. "That's the tricky part," Elias explained. "Because you are married, and because he is listed as an authorized officer on the business accounts, he technically has the right to move funds. But creating a shadow LLC to siphon money into a private property for a mistress, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. It's financial abuse. But if you confront him now, he could drain whatever is left before we can freeze it." "Then we don't confront him," I said. "We prepare. He thinks he's playing checkers, Elias. I want to play chess. He wants to act like the CEO. Let's see how he runs a company with no money, no credit, and no wife to clean up his mess." Over the next 3 weeks, Elias and I worked in absolute secrecy. We didn't just plug the holes. We rerouted the entire river. Because Samira's Soul Food was originally founded before my marriage, and the trademark was entirely in my name, Elias helped me create a new corporate entity. A legally ironclad trust. I quietly transferred our most valuable vendor contracts, the client lists, and the intellectual property to the new trust. I opened new bank accounts that Marcus didn't even know existed. I left the old accounts open, the ones Marcus had access to, but I let them dry up, leaving just enough to cover basic operating expenses so he wouldn't suspect a thing. Meanwhile, I played the part of the tired, oblivious wife perfectly. I ironed his shirts. I listened to his lies about business trips. I watched him text his mistress from across the dinner table. Every time he smiled at his phone, I thought about the legal papers sitting in Elias's safe. Then came the third Sunday in November, the day of our annual family cookout. In my family, the Sunday cookout is sacred. It's held at our house, and everyone comes. My children, my cousins, the aunts and uncles. It's a day of loud music, spades games on the patio, and tables groaning under the weight of good food. I was at the grill, flipping ribs, when the chatter in the backyard suddenly died down. The kind of silence that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I turned around. Marcus was walking through the side gate, and holding his hand, looking nervous but defiant, was Renee. My 35-year-old son, Jamal, dropped his beer bottle. It shattered on the patio. My daughter, Tasha, covered her mouth. The aunts and uncles froze, staring at Marcus as if he had brought a live rattlesnake into the yard. Marcus puffed out his chest, wearing a designer linen shirt I had unknowingly paid for. He walked right up to the patio, silencing the music with a flick of his wrist. "Family," Marcus announced, his voice booming over the quiet yard. "I know this is a shock, but I believe in being an honest man. I believe in living my truth." He looked at me, not with guilt, but with a smug, arrogant pity. "Samira and I have had a good run," he said, as if he were talking about a leased car, not a 35-year marriage. "But we've grown apart. I've found someone who appreciates me for who I am, someone who needs me. Renee and I are building a life together." The yard erupted into murmurs, but Marcus held up his hand. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow," he continued, looking right into my eyes. "And Samira, since I'm the one stepping up to expand our business through M&R Ventures, and since my name is on the deed to this house, I'm going to need you to pack your things by the end of the month. Renee and I will be taking over the main property." He really believed it. He really thought he had outsmarted me. He thought because he was the man, because he talked loud and wore the suits, that the empire I built with my bare hands somehow belonged to him. Renee stood behind him, clutching her expensive purse, offering me a tight, fake smile of sympathy. "I'm sorry, Samira," she whispered, loud enough for the aunts to hear. "You're a strong woman. You'll be fine." I looked at my husband. I looked at his mistress. Then I looked at my children, waiting to see them jump to my defense, waiting to see Jamal throw a punch or Tasha scream at her father. But they didn't. Jamal looked at his shoes. Tasha looked away. I took a slow, deep breath. I picked up a pair of tongs, casually flipped a rack of ribs so they wouldn't burn, and wiped my hands on my apron. "Well," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air like a knife, "I suppose that means you won't be staying for dinner." The silence that followed Marcus's grand exit from my backyard was heavier than the August humidity. The aunts and uncles slowly packed up their Tupperware, murmuring quiet apologies as they shuffled out the side gate. Nobody looked me in the eye. That's the thing about a public humiliation. People don't know whether to treat you like a victim or a ghost. I didn't cry. I stayed at the grill, wrapping the leftover ribs in foil, wiping down the stainless steel with a rag until I could see my own reflection. I am a 50-year-old woman who has spent her entire adult life making sure her family never knew the sting of an unpaid light bill or the shame of an empty pantry. I thought that kind of sacrifice bought loyalty. I was about to find out exactly what it bought. 3 days later, my children came to the house. Jamal and Tasha walked into the living room looking like they were attending a funeral. They wouldn't sit on the sofa next to me. Instead, they stood by the fireplace, shifting their weight, exchanging nervous glances. "Mom," Jamal started, clearing his throat, "we need to talk about Dad, and about the business." "What about him?" I asked, folding a hand towel on my lap. Tasha crossed her arms, defensive before I even said a word. "Look, Mom, Dad is really serious about this new M&R Ventures thing. He's got real capital backing him. He's talking about franchising, about taking the family brand national, and he offered Jamal the VP of technology position." I looked at my 35-year-old son, a man whose last 3 tech apps had crashed and burned, taking $50,000 of my hard-earned catering money with them. VP of technology? For a catering company that doesn't exist yet? Jamal bristled. "It will exist. Dad is ready to invest in my vision, Mom. Something you've always been too stingy to do. He understands the modern market." "And you, Tasha?" I turned to my daughter. "What did your father promise you?" She had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but her greed won out. "He promised to pay off my student loans and my car note. He said he has access to a massive line of credit through the new LLC. But Mom, he can only do it if you don't drag out the divorce. If you just give him the deed to this house and let him take his 50% of the corporate accounts quietly, we can all walk away wealthy." The air in the room grew completely still. I looked at the 2 human beings I had carried in my body, the children I had burned my arms on commercial fryers to put through college. They weren't here to comfort their mother after their father flaunted his mistress in our backyard. They were here as his negotiators. They had been bought. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dropping to a low, quiet register that made them both stop fidgeting. "You want me to surrender the home I paid for and hand over half of the business I built from scratch so your father can fund your fantasies using money he plans to steal from me?" "It's not stealing, Mom," Jamal argued, stepping forward. "His name is on the LLC. He worked for the company, too. You've always been a control freak. For once in your life, just let Dad lead. Let him take care of us." I stood up slowly. I walked over to the entryway console table and picked up a small silver tray. I held it out to them. "House keys," I said. "Excuse me?" Tasha blinked. "Your house keys, and the corporate credit cards I gave you both for emergencies. Put them on the tray." "Mom, you're being dramatic," Jamal scoffed. "I am being a businesswoman," I replied, my eyes locked onto his. "Since you two have decided to accept employment and financial support from M&R Ventures, it is a conflict of interest for you to hold assets belonging to Samira's soul food. Keys, cards, now." They argued, they yelled. Tasha even squeezed out a few tears, calling me a bitter, jealous old woman who was driving her family away. But when they saw the dead, unyielding look in my eyes, they emptied their pockets. They threw the keys and the black cards onto the silver tray. The clatter echoed in the quiet house. As the front door slammed behind them, my heart shattered into a million irreparable pieces. But a strange thing happens when your heart breaks completely. It stops aching. It just turns to ice. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, Elias. "Elias," I said. "They chose him. Shut it all down. Every single dime." For the next 2 weeks, Marcus lived like a king in his new suburban castle. According to the community grapevine, he and Renee were throwing lavish dinner parties, bragging about their new corporate venture. Renee was getting her nails done every 3 days, driving her new Mercedes around town like she was royalty. Marcus was busy trying to poach my clients. He was visiting the upscale event planners in the city, handing out glossy M&R Ventures business cards, promising them the same authentic Southern menus but with upgraded modern management. He thought he was invincible. Right up until the morning he walked into Imperial Restaurant Supply to buy $80,000 worth of commercial kitchen equipment for his new prep center. I know exactly how it happened because the manager of Imperial, a man named Gregory who had been selling me stoves for 20 years, called me the second Marcus walked out the door. "Samira," Gregory whispered into the phone, "your husband just came in here with some young woman. Tried to buy 3 walk-in freezers and a fleet of convection ovens." He handed me the corporate black card. "And what did the machine say, Gregory?" I asked, sipping my morning coffee on my patio. "Declined. Code 05. Do not honor." He got loud, Samira. Started yelling at my cashier, saying he's a millionaire and our machines were broken. He pulled out 2 other cards tied to your joint accounts. Declined. Declined. He stormed out of here looking like he'd seen a ghost. The ghost wasn't in the machine. The ghost was the illusion of his wealth evaporating into thin air. 20 minutes later, the heavy glass door of my catering headquarters flew open so hard it cracked against the doorstop. Marcus marched into the main prep kitchen, his face flushed a deep, violent purple. The kitchen staff, my loyal crew who had been with me for a decade, stopped chopping and stared. "Get out," Marcus barked at the staff. "Everybody out. I need to speak to my wife." I didn't look up from the clipboard I was reviewing. "You don't work here, Marcus. You don't get to dismiss my staff. Keep chopping, everyone." Marcus stormed into my small back office and slammed the door behind us. "What the hell did you do, Samira? I just tried to make a purchase for the new branch, and the bank told me the accounts are frozen. They said the main operating account is overdrawn." "Oh, it's not frozen, Marcus," I said calmly, taking off my reading glasses. "It's just empty." "Empty? We had $400,000 in liquid capital in that account," he screamed, slamming his hands on my desk. "Did you steal my money?" "Your money?" I tilted my head, looking at him as if he were a slow child. "Marcus, you embezzled $187,000 over the last 2 years to buy a house, a car, and designer bags for your mistress. Did you really think I wouldn't balance my own books?" He flinched, but the arrogance quickly returned. "I am a 50% partner in this LLC. My name is on the incorporation papers. You can't just hide the money, Samira. That's illegal. I'll call my lawyer right now and have you arrested for financial fraud." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "Call him," I whispered. "But while you're on the phone, you might want to ask him to explain corporate restructuring. You see, Marcus, Samira's Soul Food LLC, the company you have half ownership of, hasn't been an operating business for 6 months. His face went blank. "What are you talking about?" 6 months ago, I established a blind trust, I explained, speaking slowly so he could absorb every agonizing word. I legally transferred all of our vendor contracts, our intellectual property, our recipes, and our client lists into a new entity, an entity solely owned by my trust. The LLC that your name is attached to is nothing but a hollow shell. It holds no cash. It holds no contracts. I stood up and leaned over the desk, invading his space. "Do you know what that shell company does hold, Marcus? It holds the massive debt you accumulated. It holds the line of credit you maxed out to pay for Renee's Mercedes. It holds the liability. You aren't a millionaire, Marcus. You are the 50% owner of a bankrupt corporation." "You can't do that," he stammered, the color draining from his face. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. "The house. I put the down payment on the Oakwood house from that account." "Yes, you did," I agreed pleasantly. "Which means you used funds from an insolvent company to purchase a private asset. That's called fraudulent conveyance. My lawyer informed the bank about it yesterday. In fact, I imagine Renee is getting a visit from the repossession agents right about now." Right on cue, his cell phone began to ring. The screen lit up with Renee's face. He stared at it as if it were a live grenade. "You better answer that, Marcus," I said softly. "I hear she gets very anxious when she doesn't have a strong man to protect her." The phone on Marcus's palm buzzed like an angry hornet. Renee's picture, a heavily filtered selfie of her pouting in the passenger seat of the Mercedes I had inadvertently paid for, lit up the screen. I didn't say a word. I just raised my eyebrows and gestured to the phone. "Take it, Marcus. It's bad manners to keep your business partner waiting." He swiped the screen, his hand trembling so badly he almost dropped the device. "Renee? Baby, I'm in a meeting. He didn't even get to finish his sentence. Renee's voice was so loud and so shrill that I could hear her perfectly from across my desk. "Marcus, where are you? There is a tow truck backing into the driveway right now. They have the Mercedes hooked up. They're saying the lease is in default due to fraudulent funds. Marcus, do something. Call them off." Marcus's eyes darted wildly around my small office, looking at the faded wallpaper, the filing cabinets, anywhere but at me. "Renee, calm down, baby. It's just a misunderstanding with the bank. I'll call the dealership right now. Just go inside the house." "I can't go inside the house," Renee shrieked, her carefully cultivated soft-spoken persona completely dissolving into a frantic screech. "There's a man in a suit here taping a foreclosure notice to the front door. He says the mortgage was paid with embezzled corporate funds and the bank is seizing the property. Marcus, what did you do?" He hung up on her. He actually panicked and pressed the end call button. Then he looked at me, his chest heaving, the slick, handsome facade completely melting away to reveal the terrified, powerless man he truly was. "Samira," he begged, his voice cracking. The arrogance from the Sunday cookout was completely gone. "Please, you have to fix this. They're taking the car. They're taking the house. I'll be ruined." I stood up, smoothed down the front of my apron, and walked around my desk. I opened the door to the main kitchen, where 20 of my staff members had suddenly become very interested in peeling potatoes in absolute silence. "I'm not fixing anything, Marcus," I said loudly, my voice carrying over the hum of the commercial refrigerators. "You wanted to be the boss. You wanted to run the empire. Well, congratulations. You are now the sole manager of a bankrupt shell company with nearly $200,000 in liabilities. I suggest you go handle your business." I pointed to the heavy glass exit door. "Now get out of my kitchen before I call the police and have you trespassed." I watched him walk out. He didn't strut. He didn't puff out his chest. He dragged his feet, his shoulders slumped, looking every bit of his 65 years. He looked like an old, tired man who had just realized he had gambled his entire life away on a pair of loaded dice. If you're enjoying this story, let me know in the comments if you've ever had to watch karma do its work up close. It is a beautiful, terrible thing to witness. But my work wasn't done. Marcus was only one part of the equation. There were still the 2 children who had stood in my living room and tried to auction off my life's work to the highest bidder. It took exactly 48 hours for reality to hit Jamal and Tasha. I was at the bank on a Friday afternoon, finalizing the payroll for my new trust-owned company, when my cell phone rang. It was Jamal. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, Tasha called. I let that go to voicemail too. By the time I got back to the catering hall, Jamal was sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. My 35-year-old son, the brilliant tech entrepreneur who thought his mother was too old-fashioned to understand business. "Mom," he said, jumping up as I walked toward the door. "Mom, please, you have to talk to me. My web servers just got shut down. The hosting company tried to run the corporate card for my monthly maintenance fees, and it declined. My entire app is offline. My investors are calling me. I tried to call Dad to get the M&R Ventures account number he promised me, but his phone is disconnected." I unlocked the heavy glass doors and walked inside. Jamal followed me like a lost puppy. "Your father's phone is disconnected because the family plan was in my name, and I removed his line," I explained calmly, walking into the kitchen to check the inventory. "And as for M&R Ventures, Jamal, it doesn't exist. It never did. It was a fantasy your father created to impress a woman 20 years younger than him." Jamal froze in the middle of the hallway. "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" He showed me the incorporation papers. He promised me the VP position. He promised me funding. "He lied to you," I said, turning to face him. "He lied to you to get you on his side, to turn you against me so I would quietly hand over this business. And you fell for it." You were so eager to take the easy money, so desperate to avoid actually working for a living, that you sold out your own mother." "Mom, no, I didn't know." "You knew he brought his mistress to my house." I cut him off, my voice sharp and unforgiving. "You knew he told me to pack my bags. And you came to my living room and told me to surrender. Your app is offline, Jamal? Good. Maybe now you'll go get a real job, pay your own bills, and learn what it actually takes to build something." Before he could stammer out another excuse, the kitchen door swung open and Tasha stormed in. She was carrying a designer shopping bag, but her face was streaked with angry tears. "My car got towed!" she shrieked, not even noticing Jamal standing there looking completely defeated. "I was at the grocery store and they towed my car right out of the parking lot. I called the finance company and they said the payments haven't been made in 3 months. Mom, why didn't you pay my car note?" I looked at my daughter, a 32-year-old mother of 2, throwing a tantrum in the middle of my workplace because I hadn't paid for her luxury vehicle. "I didn't pay your car note, Tasha, because you told me you were accepting financial support from your father," I reminded her, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. "You said he had a massive line of credit. You said I was just a bitter old woman. So I took you off my payroll. I removed your emergency cards. I let you be the independent woman you claimed to be." Tasha's mouth dropped open. She looked at Jamal, then back at me. "But Dad doesn't have any money. He just called me begging to borrow $500 for a motel room." That piece of information made me pause. "A motel room? Why does your father need a motel room?" I asked, a genuine curiosity creeping into my voice. "He has that beautiful 4-bedroom house in Oakwood with Renee." Tasha let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Not anymore, he doesn't. He went back to the Oakwood house yesterday after the bank froze everything. He said Renee told him she was going to pack a bag and go stay with her sister until the dust settled." "Let me guess," I said, leaning against the stainless steel prep table. "She didn't just pack a bag." "She cleared the place out," Tasha said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Dad said when he got back to the house that evening, the front door was wide open. Renee hired a moving truck. She took the living room furniture, the flat-screen TVs, the espresso machine, even the expensive silk sheets off the bed. She took every piece of jewelry he ever bought her. She completely ghosted him, blocked his number, deleted her social media. She's gone." I couldn't help it. A slow, deep chuckle rumbled in my chest. It started small, but then it grew into a full, hearty laugh that echoed off the tile walls of the kitchen. My children stared at me like I had lost my mind. But I hadn't lost my mind. I had finally found my freedom. Marcus thought he had bought the loyalty of a beautiful younger woman. He thought his money made him a king. But Renee wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a professional grifter. She had smelled the weakness in him from a mile away. She played her part perfectly as long as the credit cards kept clearing. But the minute she realized the golden goose was actually a broke 65-year-old man with a mountain of debt, she packed up the circus and moved on to her next mark, leaving Marcus completely alone. No wife, no business, no mistress, and standing in an empty, foreclosed house with nothing but the tailored suit on his back. "Mom, it's not funny," Tasha whined, wiping her nose. "What are we supposed to do? I have kids. Jamal has investors. We need help." I stopped laughing. I looked at the two of them, standing shoulder to shoulder in their expensive clothes, waiting for me to pull out my checkbook and make their problems disappear. For 30 years, that is exactly what I would have done. I would have swallowed my pride, worked an extra 50 hours a week, and bailed them out. "What you are supposed to do," I said, my voice dropping back to that icy, unyielding tone, "is grow up." I walked over to the back office and returned a moment later with 2 heavy industrial-sized aprons. I threw them onto the stainless steel table in front of them. They landed with a heavy thud. "I have 2 openings for entry-level prep cooks," I said. "The pay is minimum wage. You clock in at 4 in the morning to scrub the potatoes and clean the grease traps. If you want to feed your kids, Tasha, you put on the apron. If you want to pay back your investors, Jamal, you put on the apron. Otherwise, there is the door, because the Bank of Mom is permanently closed." They stared at the aprons like I had just thrown 2 live snakes on the table. "You can't be serious," Jamal whispered. "I have a master's degree." "Then you should be very good at counting potatoes," I replied. "Take it or leave it." Neither of them touched the aprons. Tasha spun around on her heel and stormed out, muttering under her breath about how I was a monster. Jamal lingered for a moment, his pride warring with his desperation, before he finally shook his head and followed his sister out the door. I watched them leave, feeling a sharp twinge of sorrow in my chest. It hurt to watch my children struggle. It hurt to know I had raised two adults who were so deeply entitled. But sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do is let her children hit the concrete. It's the only way they learn how to stand up on their own. With my children cut off and Renee vanished into thin air, Marcus was entirely out of options. But a desperate man is a dangerous man. 2 days later, I was served with legal papers. Marcus had found a sleazy, aggressive divorce attorney who was willing to work on contingency. The papers were a masterpiece of legal fiction. Marcus was suing me for half of the original LLC's stated value, claiming I had illegally hidden marital assets and committed corporate espionage by transferring contracts to my trust. He was demanding an emergency injunction to freeze my new accounts and demanding that I pay him $10,000 a month in spousal support because he was now destitute and homeless due to my vindictive actions. He was trying to drag me into a long, brutal, expensive court battle. He thought that if he made it painful enough, if he threatened to drag our family name through the mud in a public trial, I would cave. He thought I would write him a fat settlement check just to make him go away. I immediately called Elias. I drove to his office, throwing the thick stack of legal demands onto his mahogany desk. "Look at this, Elias," I said, pacing the floor. "He wants spousal support. From the woman he cheated on. From the business he tried to steal." Elias adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents with a calm, practiced eye. He didn't look worried. In fact, the corner of his mouth twitched upward into a small, predatory smile. "Samira," Elias said gently, tapping his pen against the paper. "Let him sue. Let him bring this to a judge, because Marcus and his bargain bin lawyer have made a critical error." "What error?" I asked, stopping my pacing. Elias leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the quiet confidence of a man who held a royal flush. "They are demanding a full forensic accounting of the business finances over the last 5 years to prove you hid money, which means we now have the legal right, no, the legal obligation, to present a full forensic accounting of where every single dime went." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick red folder. I knew that folder. It was the one we had been compiling for months. "By taking you to court, Marcus just gave us the platform to enter his embezzlement into the public legal record," Elias explained softly. "We aren't just going to show the judge that you protected your assets legally. We are going to show the judge exactly how he committed corporate fraud. He thinks he's filing a civil lawsuit for money. What he's actually doing is handing the district attorney a signed confession for a felony." Elias closed the folder with a satisfying snap. "Get ready, Samira. We're going to court, and your husband is going to leave in handcuffs." The morning of the hearing, the sky was a crisp, clear blue. I wore a tailored emerald green suit, my hair perfectly styled, and a pair of diamond stud earrings I had bought for myself 5 years ago. I didn't look like a broken, discarded wife. I looked like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar food empire, because that is exactly who I was. Elias Thorne met me at the courthouse steps, carrying his worn leather briefcase. He gave me a single, reassuring nod. "Ready to finish this, Samira?" "I've been ready since the day he walked into my backyard with that woman," I replied. When we walked into the courtroom, Marcus was already sitting at the plaintiff's table. The sight of him almost made me pity him. Almost. The man who always prided himself on wearing designer labels was swimming in a navy suit that looked 2 sizes too big. Without my cooking, without the luxurious lifestyle I provided, and with the stress of Renee robbing him blind, he had lost weight. He looked gray, exhausted, and deeply panicked. Next to him sat his lawyer, a slick-haired man named Sterling, who looked like he belonged on a cheap billboard advertising personal injury lawsuits. Judge Miller, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and zero patience for foolishness, took the bench. "All right," she sighed, looking over the file. "I see a motion for an emergency injunction, a demand for spousal support, and accusations of hidden marital assets. Mr. Sterling, you filed this circus. Go ahead and start the show." Sterling stood up, puffing out his chest. "Your Honor, my client, Marcus, has been the victim of a malicious corporate takeover by his own wife. For 30 years, he helped build Samira's Soul Food into a local institution. Yet when their marriage hit a rough patch, Mrs. Williams secretly transferred the company's lucrative contracts into a hidden trust, leaving my client with a bankrupt shell company. He is currently homeless and destitute." We demand a forensic audit of all accounts and immediate spousal support. Judge Miller peered over her glasses at Elias. Mr. Thorne, your response? Elias stood up slowly. He didn't puff out his chest. He didn't raise his voice. He simply unclasped his leather briefcase and pulled out the thick red folder. Your Honor, Elias said, his voice smooth as velvet. We do not contest the demand for a forensic audit. In fact, we welcome it. We have already completed one. Elias handed a copy of the thick binder to the bailiff to pass to the judge, and another copy to Mr. Sterling. If you turn to page 12, Your Honor, you will see exactly why Samira's Soul Food LLC is currently insolvent. It is not because my client hid assets. It is because Mr. Williams systematically embezzled $187,000 from the corporate operating account over a period of 24 months. Sterling's confident smirk vanished. He began flipping frantically through the binder. Marcus sank lower in his chair, his eyes glued to the mahogany table. You will see wire transfers to an unauthorized, hidden LLC named M&R Ventures, Elias continued, pacing slowly in front of our table. You will see a $50,000 down payment on a residential property in Oakwood, purchased for Mr. Williams' mistress. You will see luxury car leases, jewelry receipts, and vacations, all paid for with company funds, without the knowledge or consent of the primary shareholder, my client. Judge Miller flipped through the pages, her lips thinning into a hard line. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, are you aware that your client used corporate funds to finance a personal affair, and then you brought him into my courtroom to demand spousal support? Your Honor, I was not informed of these specific transactions, Sterling stammered, glaring daggers at Marcus. It gets worse, Your Honor, I whispered to Elias. Elias nodded and delivered the final blow. Because Mr. Williams used corporate funds to purchase that Oakwood property, the bank has already foreclosed on it due to fraudulent conveyance. The business debts he incurred are entirely in his name as the managing partner of that specific LC. My client, Mrs. Williams, simply protected her intellectual property, which she owned prior to the marriage, by moving it into a legal trust before Mr. Williams could steal the rest of it. Elias turned to face Marcus directly. This is not just a civil dispute, Your Honor. What Mr. Williams has done constitutes felony embezzlement and corporate fraud. We have a meeting scheduled with the district attorney's office at 2 o'clock this afternoon to hand over this binder. The courtroom went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. If you've ever watched a man realize that his entire life is over, you know it's not a loud moment. It's terrifyingly quiet. Marcus grabbed his lawyer's arm. Sterling, do something! Tell them they can't do that. I'm her husband. Sterling violently shook Marcus's hand off his arm. Shut up, Marcus, he hissed. You lied to me. You're about to go to prison. Elias cleared his throat. However, Your Honor, my client is a merciful woman. She wishes to conclude this painful chapter of her life without the media circus of a criminal trial. I stood up then. It was my turn. I have a settlement offer, Your Honor, I said, keeping my posture perfectly straight. Marcus will sign a full waiver, relinquishing any and all claims to my businesses, my trust, and my home. He will drop his demand for spousal support permanently. In exchange, I will assume the remaining corporate debt of the LLC, effectively wiping his financial slate clean, and I will cancel the meeting with the district attorney. Judge Miller looked at Marcus. Mr. Williams, your wife is offering you a get-out-of-jail-free card. She is offering to pay off the massive debt you accumulated while cheating on her, just so she never has to look at you again. I suggest you take a pen and sign whatever she puts in front of you, or I will personally call the DA myself. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't posture. He took the pen from Sterling with a shaking hand and signed the divorce settlement. He signed away the house. He signed away the business. He signed away the last 35 years of his life. As we walked out of the courtroom, Marcus stopped me in the hallway. There was no one around, just the two of us. Samira, he whispered, his eyes filled with tears. I have nothing. No house, no car, no credit. Renee took my clothes, Samira. She took everything. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at this man. I remembered the days when we were young, building a dream together. I remembered the Sunday dinners, the laughter, the life we had shared. But the woman who loved him had died the day he brought his mistress to my cookout. I hear there are some very affordable studio apartments on the east side, Marcus, I said softly. You've got a clean slate now. Better start looking for a job. I turned on my heel and walked out the heavy glass doors into the bright, warm sunlight. For the first time in 3 decades, I was breathing air that belonged entirely to me. It has been 8 months since that day in court. They say time heals all wounds, but I prefer to say that time reveals the truth. My new business, housed under my legal trust, didn't just survive, it exploded. Without Marcus skimming off the top to fund his ego, our profit margins doubled. I opened a second catering kitchen across town and finally bought that commercial bakery space I had been dreaming about for years. And what about my children? Well, Jamal and Tasha didn't take the aprons that day. Their pride wouldn't let them scrub potatoes for minimum wage. But the real world is a harsh teacher. When the Bank of Mom permanently closed its doors, reality set in fast. Jamal's investors pulled out completely. Without my money to prop him up, his tech startup folded in 3 weeks. He had to sell his expensive condo and move into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. Last I heard, he swallowed his pride and took a mid-level IT help desk job at a hospital. He's working a 9 to 5, answering phones, and dealing with angry doctors whose computers won't turn on. Tasha had her luxury SUV repossessed. She had to move out of her upscale neighborhood and rent a modest townhouse. She now rides the bus to her job as a receptionist at a dental office. For 6 months, neither of them spoke to me. But last Sunday, while I was preparing dinner in my quiet, peaceful house, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jamal and Tasha standing on the porch. No designer clothes, no entitled attitudes, just 2 adults looking incredibly humbled. "Mom," Tasha said, her voice thick with emotion. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside and let them into the living room. We sat down and the silence stretched for a long time. Finally, Jamal spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, looking down at his hands. "I'm so sorry. I've been working this IT job for 5 months. My boss screams at me, the hours are terrible, and after I pay my rent and my groceries, I have exactly $42 left in my checking account. I don't know how you did it for 30 years. I don't know how you worked so hard and put up with us taking it all for granted." Tasha was openly crying now. "Dad called me last week. He's working as a greeter at a hardware store, living in a studio above a laundromat. He asked me for $50, Mom. I told him I didn't have it. Because I don't. You were right. He lied to us, and we were so greedy we just went along with it." I looked at my children. My heart softened, but my boundaries remained like steel. "I forgive you," I said gently. "You are my children, and I will always love you. But the dynamic of this family has permanently changed. I am not your ATM. I am your mother. We can rebuild our relationship, but we are going to build it on respect, not on my bank account." They nodded, both of them crying, and for the first time in years, the hugs they gave me felt genuine. They didn't feel like transactions. They felt like family. We are slowly finding our way back to each other. Jamal comes over on Tuesdays to help me fix things around the house, and Tasha brings the grandkids over on Sundays. We don't have massive, extravagant cookouts anymore. We just have quiet, honest dinners. As for me, I am thriving. At my age, society tells women we are supposed to fade into the background. We are supposed to quietly accept whatever disrespect is handed to us, shrink ourselves down, and just be grateful to have a man around. But society is wrong. I built an empire with my bare hands. I survived the ultimate betrayal by the person I trusted most. I protected my legacy, humbled my entitled children, and sent a cheating, thieving man out into the cold with exactly what he deserved. Nothing. Every morning I wake up in a house that is entirely mine. I drink my coffee on the patio, listening to the birds, feeling the sun on my face. There is no one to clean up after, no one to lie to me, and no one to make me feel small. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Never let anyone convince you that your kindness is weakness. Never apologize for protecting what you built. And most importantly, never be afraid to burn down a toxic table, because you have all the tools you need to build a better one by yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, drop a heart in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama. Until next time, stay strong, know your worth, and keep your receipts.